edition of the Just Our Two Cents podcast. And today we have with us a very special guest, Jeremy Proome, a rugby player, touch rugby player, I should get that right, drummer, and all-round nice guy. And he's going to share his story with us today. So, yeah, Jeremy, welcome.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, guys.
Welcome, Jeremy. Yeah. So, let the people know who you are, man.
So I'm Jeremy, obviously. I'm 31 years old, a Joburg boy, born and bred, moved to Cape Town a couple of years ago, I think about 6 years ago. Not a professional athlete by any means, but real keen amateur sportsman, club rugby, club touch rugby player. As Ian mentioned, I'm really into my music, playing drums. It's quite an active guy, but on the side, obviously, I enjoy my quiet PlayStation nights and things like that. So quite into everything. I work in the media industry as a journalist. So here in used to move around in the sports media world. So always had a love for sports, love for writing about sports, quite a normal 30-odd-year-old South African boy who loves his rugby, loves his time out, and otherwise that's it.
So if I could just set the scene for you, kind of like of what we want to do today is like, when you go online, or when most people go online and they're looking for people who've had stories with rehab or injuries, whatever, all you see Usain Bolt and his recovery from his hamstring. You see Skalkberger and his recovery from his injury, but it's difficult for the sort of average guy on the street to relate to that, because what you always hear is, but they've got 10 physios looking after them and they can go to physio 5 times a day, they don't have to pay for anything, and they don't have to actually do work. So what we want to try and do today is kind of get your perspective from your rehab journey as well, man. Amongst other things, obviously we'll talk to you more generally, but that's kind of like the view we want to get, because that's what people want to know, So, maybe you can just start us off by saying or telling us what your journey, where it started, in terms of like the injury, so to speak.
I've been quite lucky myself. I never had a broken bone or anything like that. So I was quite injury non-prone, I guess. So I was like playing my club or social sports with a little bit of reckless abandon, I guess. Rock up at the field, slip your boots on and play type of a thing. And I've always been lucky, I had a dislocated shoulder in high school, but I think that was the biggest thing ever, So, I was kind of aware of just being in the sports media world. I was kind of aware of like the potential injuries and risks, obviously, especially associated with contact sports, but I was very fortunate to be dodging them my whole life. I unfortunately had an ACL tear, playing touch rugby on a cold, wintry night. Probably should have gone home, was playing too many games. It was basically just a very unfortunate moment.
Do you remember how it happened?
A little bit vague, but it was kind of a leg plant on my left leg to kind of cut to the right to beat a defender that was coming across that side of my peripheral vision. Thought I could get inside of him quickly, it happened so fast. But whether it was the uneven ground because it wasn't the best rugby pitch we were playing on, or it was literally just my knee saying this is time to take a rest. Yeah.
And did you know at the time that it was your ACL?
No, not at all. I could, like I said, not having any serious injury, I didn't really have a gauge of how bad it was or how good it was. It was definitely a sensation and a feeling that I'd never felt before. In hindsight, probably the most pain I've ever felt, not to freak people out, but weird pop crunch, felt the way I described it, I think I mentioned to you once before, was like dry ice. If you've ever held dry ice, immediately burns your hands. If that was wrapped around your knee, like in an instant.
Man.
So
terrible.
your ice cream, your knee just feels like an ice cream blob, basically. So
did you try to continue playing, or did you call it at the time?
At that point in time, I could. Could not play, could not stand. I'd had some light knee hyperextensions, back in the day, and kind of thought it was maybe one of those, but Definitely the audible, whether you could hear it or not, that crunching sensation and sound didn't seem normal. So I kind of, hobbled to the side of the field and realized there was something, a little more sinister than I had dealt with in the past.
Okay. And then, okay, that happens. What was your, where were you mentally? What did you decide to do? Okay, should I get it checked out? And tell us about going from there.
Yeah, I think mentally it was, I think I'm quite hard on myself, and I kind of, I don't know how many other people feel, but it was like a little bit maybe of like embarrassment or frustration because you feel like you did something wrong, or you weren't doing something, hence why you endured the injury. So not in a great headspace, but the ACL concern wasn't on my radar at all. I kind of thought it wasn't that sinister. So the initial plan was pack some ice on, get that leg up, and obviously just tackle it in the morning type of a thing. From there, obviously, there were stability issues the next day. I could tell it wasn't as good, but also I wasn't as familiar with like the ACL kind of journey. My girlfriend had torn her ACL actually a few years before, which was quite interesting, but I was kind of, maybe it was, in retrospect, maybe a bit of denial or pushing that to the back of my mind. But, she was looking at me shaking her head, but I was kind of like, it's fine. So eventually, obviously, went to a biokineticist to get an assessment. And yeah, I mean, there was kind of a bit of poking and prodding, a bit of, I assume, the kind of the draw test, and their diagnosis was that there was no real issue. Put some ice on it, do some light rehab, and get back to sports when you're ready.
Okay, and was that a once-off session, or was there a timeline to when you could get back to the sport?
Not necessarily. It was kind of a quick consultation, and then a few return visits, maybe 2 or 3 over the course of maybe 2 months. And then I did, I was doing all the rehab I could because I just wanted to get back to sports. But not a lot of direction was given on what I needed to actually do. I was just starting to do one-legged squats, whatever I could. Probably my form was off, things like that. So it was kind of like left out a little bit to the wilderness with how to get back. And it was up to kind of my decision when to return.
So at this stage where you kind of like eating WebMD and kind of like trying to figure out what's going on, what do I need to do?
Yeah, I was
exactly. Up, that kind of
I was doing the like typical Google rabbit hole.
Okay.
And you Google, I've got a pain in my knee, and then things that pop up, you have stage 4 cancer type of thing. So you have some sleepless nights and things like that. But yeah, I mean, the amount of anecdotal evidence from different people saying it's definitely this or it's definitely that. I mean, it does get quite overwhelming. So I was quite reliant on the biokineticist I was seeing to gauge me on it, and I didn't know. I was kind of taking his word for it also because I hadn't experienced something like that before and didn't know the timeline or anything. I assumed if there was a major problem, he would have sent me off immediately for an MRI, whatever the case was. And because that didn't happen, I was like, it's definitely not as bad as I thought. Cool, get back to sports.
And your gut, what was that kind of like telling you?
Yeah, I think after the first phase, when I did return to sport, I was kind of obviously a bit concerned and strapping and doing what I could, and then my knee collapsed again the first game back, and then went to another biokineticist. At this time I thought maybe let me go to a different biokineticist. Funny, the exact same experience, kind of poked, prodded, another, pack some ice on it, come back in 4 weeks, and let's see how you're going.
So just to clear up with you, Jeremy, you're saying biokineticist, you haven't thought yet of going to a physio at this stage?
No.
Okay, alright.
I guess my kind of internal knowledge of the difference between a biokineticist and a physio was kind of just based on recommendations from people. I think I was kind of an ache and pain, and a friend of mine said, "Oh, go, see this person." So that was the motivator behind that decision.
Okay, and second practitioner says back to my son, rehab. What happens then?
Yeah, kind of felt a bit better, felt my legs were getting stronger. Actually just like picked up, joined a kind of like a HIIT gym class. Also I thought maybe this is a good solution that's really gonna bulk out my legs and fix anything let's not have a third collapse, you know. I wasn't really exploring of why this collapse was happening. I was just like, let me just pack on muscle type of a thing. And 4 or 5 months go by, but I'm playing touch rugby 2 or 3 times a week, so quite a lot of, I would say, physical strain, but feeling good. Cutting, changing angles, everything's feeling fine, actually like playing quite well, but there was a little doubt in my mind, to answer your question, that something's not right.
Sorry to cut you, but at this point in time, the HIIT classes were kind of like your only rehab, so to speak, or strengthening.
That was like the only extracurricular rehab thing I was doing. I wasn't doing anything at home, and that was twice a week. A lot of the, I guess, like the exercises are, the burpees and the things like that. So I don't necessarily think great strengthening and control type of movements, but I mean, in my mind, I was doing the right thing. I was feeling good. I was sweating a lot. I was no aches or pains. So yeah, and then encountered. Then I was playing. So at this point in time, I think almost 8 months, maybe a year had passed since the second collapse. I'm thinking, cool, I'm in the clear now, And then one random Sunday, playing some casual touch rugby in the park, running a straight line, and the knee just goes again. And that one was particularly bad. And that one, I knew this wasn't just a kind of a weird collapse, bit of ache and a pain. It really didn't feel good. And at that point, I think like that process of potentially this is something worse than I thought it was started kicking in.
Okay.
You seeing your girlfriend in the back of your mind going,
I told you so.
I told you so. Yeah, she was the first person I obviously called and was saying, I hurt my knee again. It was just, she kind of, I could see the look on her face. So, yeah, so then at that point, I couldn't actually even straighten my knee.
Wow.
So, the first time it happened, it was sore and there was swelling and everything, but I was like functioning. I was going to the shops, I was doing whatever. This time was like I could barely get out of the bed. So that was the penny dropping at that point. So I need to go see someone, a professional orthopedic surgeon, to get a consultation. I'm done with going to buyers and getting poked and prodded. I want to find out what's going on here.
And up to that point though, like when you were playing, you felt like normal 100%, or as close to as we
I would say so.
Like
I mean, I was changing angles. I was I'm quite more of a I'm not a very muscular guy, but I'm more of like an angle changing, sidestepping type of a play. I was stepping off my left and right with ease. No real issues.
And not really psychologically protecting the knee.
Perhaps maybe like in hindsight, because I would never really go like 100% full out. I was always kind of 80, 90 on the dial, never really pushing it too hard.
And this was sort of like a year.
Yeah, so it was about a year after. Yeah.
Alright, so you saw the orthopedic surgeon?
Yeah, so went and saw the great orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Hayden Hobbs, who operates the Cape Knee Clinic out of Vincent Pilati, and he he came so well recommended, and I was at the point now where I was starting to realize I was becoming a little bit jaded at who was who. I was kind of just like if there's a bio, they've got the certificate, they're the person to go to. Now I was starting to realize, the varying qualities of individuals you can go see. So he came highly recommended, done operations on Springboks, and everyone. He did a friend of mine who had a jiu-jitsu incident and sorted his ACL. So I was like, cool, highly recommended. I wobbled into his office and he started telling him the story I've just told you guys. And before he just had a smile on his face and was shaking his head and said, I know exactly what you've done. But he followed me into the room, quick little tug on my knee, which was quite revolting, kind of saw how stretchy it could be. They said you've 99% chance you've done your whole ACL and you need to get an MRI immediately. So then popped into, get a quick MRI, obviously corroborated exactly what he said. And his recommendation after a quick consultation was, I need to get you on the surgery table ASAP, because I'd also torn my meniscus, a massive hole in my meniscus, which I assume was that third time it collapsed, the last time, that was the
and also probably
pain.
The year of that rotation of that tibia just grinding away at that cartilage, at that meniscus.
I think that was exactly what was happening, because Dr. Hobbs said there's nothing left of the ACL, not even a little dangling whatever. There's nothing. It's gone, and your meniscus has a huge, $5 size hole in it.
Wow.
So, yeah, I mean, getting that phone call was quite a bit of a shock, even though that was kind of in the back of my mind. I was starting to Google LCL tears. How does that feel? Is it a PCL tear? Because I was trying to find anything that matched my symptoms that wasn't an ACL. But all things were pointing in that direction. So that was quite a bit of a crappy phone call to get.
So what was going through your head at that point in time?
Yeah, I think I was starting to just calculate how much time,
Okay.
the recovery time was the first thing, and I was
Also
just
going
thinking,
back-
I am now not going to throw a rugby ball or play beach bats or whatever it is for essentially a year. That was kind of the rule of thumb type thing I'd heard about ACLs or witnessed my girlfriend go through.
Yeah.
It's different when you do it and when you kind of are like really observing someone do it. So I was just thinking, there goes sport, and before he had kind of even answered my questions, I was thinking like, that was it. That's how my amateur sports career comes to an end.
Oh, so you were thinking actually that's it.
I did think that for a while, yeah.
Oh, wow. Shit. Yeah, I mean that's
That's
tough.
deep. So mentally, it's not only the physical part of it, but like mentally, like you said, I'm not elite, but I love playing sport, and now you're thinking that's one of my go-tos for like just life, and now you're thinking mentally that's done as well.
For sure. I mean, to me, it's like, I'm not playing professionally or anything, but it's quite an important routine of my daily week. I mean, I love playing touch rugby or five-side soccer, whatever it is, and having a beer with the boys afterwards. It's like food for my soul type of a thing, and I like competing, whatever it is. If it's a casual beach touch rugby game or it's more of a serious old boys game I slot into, I really love playing. So for that to be just taken away in an instant, it's like, I would consider it someone just taking away your hobby, like in an instant, and not just taking away, but knowing you're not going to do it for a year, and even if you return, you might never do it as well as you did. So it definitely took, I think the mental hurdle was the biggest thing for me, to be honest.
And how did you kind of get your mind really like to say, okay, now I have to get ready for this process that's going to happen? I mean, you obviously investigated what ACL you have, and you had experience from your girlfriend as well. But I mean, that's, like you said, it's one thing to witness it secondhand, but actually have to prepare yourself to go through it yourself. I mean, you have to kind of set aside, okay, and then, like you said, the next year or two of my life is going to be different now, completely.
Yeah, I think it did take a little while. And I think the way I tackled it was after about the first week of basically being almost in tears or just kind of shaking your head and thinking like, that's it. Stop thinking about what other hobbies or sports I might do. I mean, that's how far down that road I was going, and I think speaking to the surgeon, Dr. Hayden Hobbs, he said like, look, people get back from this. It's kind of up to you. He said, you can fix your ACL 20 times. It's like what you do with it that's going to make the difference. So it did make me the shift to think, you're not going to lie on a table, a surgeon's going to work on you, you're going to get off the table and be back where you were. It's kind of the power's in your hands to do it. So funny, just like, I think the more I became familiar with him, I'm quite a curious guy. Anything people tell me about, I want to read up about it, learn about it. So, started to read about other athletes who had encountered it, how they came back from it. A guy like a rugby player I enjoyed watching was Craig Cooper, and funny enough, I remember he tore his ACL in 2011. Suddenly, all these like memories were popping off. So I just, then observing how he came back and still plays the way he does. Well, it's not impossible. Like, yes, he's a professional athlete. So to answer your question, looking at guys who had done it, some of them unfortunately were professional athletes. And why I say unfortunately is like, because it's quite difficult to replicate their road to recovery. But then, I was lucky, my girlfriend was, funny, suddenly that turned into quite an inspiration, because she did us playing netball, and eventually after a year or so she returned to netball, kind of stronger than ever. So I was fortunate in that regard. I actually had the right people very close to me that could say like, look, you'll get there, you'll come back from this thing. And also just looking at other people and seeing, kind of how they did it. But learning about it was, I think, a huge part of it. Understanding what happened and understanding how to fix it.
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting you brought up Craig Cooper, because he's obviously known for breaking people's ankles with his side steps. So to know, even though, I mean, you're comparing yourself with an elite athlete there, it's good to know that, you know, if I then get back, this is how much, at what level I can stress my ACL and it can still be fine.
Exactly. I think it was kind of like, yes, I can't perhaps replicate exactly what he did, but if he can come back and still play that similar style that, obviously I wish I could play like him, but I would say I like, you know, play that type of like loose kind of sidestepping, you know, he was like a perfect case study that it could be done, you know, and there was a handful of other players also. And we spoke about like Zlatan, guys like this. Obviously there's some kind of biological freaks who, you know, can walk back onto the field within 6 months, but I think there's more than enough case studies out there, and I mean, that's from the professional side, but I also found, you know, there was actually, once I started looking, there was quite a community of amateur sports ACL patients, you know, on Instagram, on forums, on Facebook, that, you know, you would obviously never even notice if you didn't look for it. So it was quite cool to actually go on that, and, you know, there's a cool Instagram account called the ACL Club where people, you know, people from America who've torn, you know, the ACLs playing football, or girls playing hockey, or you know, South American guys playing whatever, you know, something. So, and everyone kind of has their own little stories, and I mean, people who slipped in the shower, or people who, you know, trying to open a window and the ACL went. So it was quite cool, and everyone posts like their, you know, the image of their scars and their surgeries, and it was quite a nice, because it is quite a lonely road, I think, doing the recovery process. So even while you're still in bed that first, you know, 3-4 weeks, you're kind of like starting to make mates on Instagram, and see that, you know, some guys are posting, oh, I did mine a year ago, now I'm playing club soccer again. So you kind of see that, oh, it's not only professional athletes who can achieve this, you know, amateur people can also, amateur or semi-amateur, whatever you want to call it, can come back to competitive sports or even become better than they were.
And I think a cool, just to take us back a little bit, a cool statement you made was that the surgery doesn't determine what you're going to be able to do afterwards. It's actually the work you're going to be putting in after surgery that determines the level, you know, the Quade Cooper level that you could return to. So I think that's a very important statement or fact that you just made there for a lot of people to understand, that doing kind of any type of surgery doesn't determine, when it comes to neuromusculoskeletal, doesn't determine the outcome. It's actually the work you put in afterwards that determines the level that you return to.
Yeah, I think eventually I realized, you know, it's like we spoke about timelines, I mean, a lot over the last year or so, but you know, the way I've eventually just looked at it myself, whether it's right or wrong, is it takes 9 months to recover from the surgery, not 9 months to get back to sport. So that's, whether that's right or wrong, that's like what you know, Dr. Hayden Hobbs, like, that's when the graft is like set in your knee, but now it's up to you. So, you know, during that 9 months, you can begin your back to sports process. But I think it's good to separate the work you do after the surgery and the recovery from the surgery. Where some people just kind of sit around, wait for 9 months, and then put their boots back on and jump on the field, you know. And I think, I came to terms quite quickly that this is, you know, it's my responsibility to get it back.
Taking ownership,
that's always what we talk
always
about.
say, taking ownership of your own injuries.
Yeah, being sort of like, if you're the person with the injury or going through the rehab, being the leader of your team rather than just being sort of like a passive participant, you know. But what I wanted to ask you was, so now you've come to that interesting crossroads again, where having had that experience pre-surgery, you know, with the sort of like the incidents that happened, then having found out that it's actually my ACL that's been busted, and having gone through the reconstruction, now you get to that point now you need to almost step back into the rehab world, having had that experience, knowing what you know now, like, what's your thought process now in terms of, like, before you said, I'll look for the degree, and if they've got a degree, they're good enough, you know? Like, what was that thought process like going into that then?
Yeah, I think, like, you know, if there was any good that came of it, I always try to look like glass half full. At least I've learned a few slight knee strengthening exercises from those unsuccessful periods, I would say, or phases. But yeah, I think it kind of made me realize that this isn't just a practitioner of some sort that you go and visit and they tell you what to do and you go and do it. You actually have to build that trust, because my trust was definitely broken with the previous individuals I saw. And maybe it was an oversight on their part or whatever the case was. I'm not sure. Maybe I didn't disclose enough, but yeah, I think it kind of jaded me a little bit in terms of what I wanted. So once I had done the surgery, I thought now you can't really stuff around anymore. Now it's time to like find the right people, find the right trustworthy people, more importantly. And so that was the strategy.
And do you have a checklist? Like the next person I'm going to see must have this, that, or
not necessarily, but obviously Wade's been my physio, and I think something that happened, I think the day we met, that never happened with anyone else. You said to me, like, I came in here and you said, what's your goal? I was like, I want to play sports again. You said, awesome. Like, I love people who have goals. You said that to me, and I said, I want to play rugby, and you said, cool, let's curate your recovery around that. Whereas everyone else, and it actually did stand out to me still to this day, whereas other people, you kind of wonder that some people, the other, previous buyers, whatever the case was, didn't even ask me kind of how it happened. We're like, oh, okay, so your knee sore, cool, get on the table, let's check it out. Never asked what I wanted to achieve from it. It seemed like it was a pain management process rather than let's get you back to where you want to be. So I think that was a cool turning point where I could see I can trust Wade. He understands what I want to do, because to go into a buyer's office or a physio's office and say, I want to get back on the field and sidestep a lot. I'm sure it makes people, people cringe. So, which wasn't the goal, but it was just to get back and play, in whatever capacity it would be. So I think I didn't have a checklist, but I was looking for someone who was like, I get it, cool, I know what you want to do.
And sorry to cut you away, he wasn't also, because sometimes we do that unintentionally, I think a lot of the time, it wasn't also automatically like negative, like saying, well, that won't happen, or we'll see if that can happen. It was like, okay, that's your goal, let's try and
for
make
sure.
it happen.
I think like if it went the other way and Wade shook his head at me and said, no, well, look, maybe we should stick to carpet bowls or something, I think it would have I think I definitely would have would have probably walked out the door, or kind of like destroyed my goal. At that point I was feeling, I knew there was an uphill battle, but I was quite optimistic about it. I just was happy to tackle it. So I think that optimism definitely helped. I wanted someone who was also, could speak to me like on a same one-on-one level and level with me about like what the goals are, be realistic, and Wade saying, it's not about, it's not a race to the finish line. This is not a time-based progress. This is a criteria-based thing. Let's hit all these milestones, and then you could get back maybe quicker, maybe longer. I think that helped me. That's what I wanted. I wanted something that was just working with someone rather than them just wanting to take your cash on a monthly basis for 9 months.
Wow, you really programmed me well. Eh?
Criteria based. You can take my job.
They sent me the memo before the podcast.
But even though like you got that kind of feeling on that first session and things like that, it still took a while to break through and gain that trust, because I can clearly remember on session number 1 was like you looking to your knee and you asking me like, you have seen cases like this before, hey? Because I think if I'm not mistaken, we had, because of that cartilage damage and meniscus damage, we had the microfracture together with the ACL. And I can clearly remember you looking at me and I'm like, you have seen cases like this before and they've turned out okay. So it's like, I've seen a couple.
I think I don't, not to take pleasure in other people's misery, but I think if there's, if Wade had seen someone and been like, oh no, he returned well, or she returned well, whatever the case was, it makes me go, oh cool, I can do it. But maybe it was just maybe a lack of confidence on my side, or when Dr. Hayden-Hobbs called me, he said, you've done a real number on your knee. So I was like, oh no. How bad is it? Like, I never heard of microfracturing. I didn't know what it was. I knew what a meniscus was, but I didn't know you could break a hole in it. I thought you could just have that like handled by Katea or whatever the case was. So that's why when I came to you, I was kind of looking for like some sort of optimistic, no, you'll be fine,
Yeah, and especially with, if I can call them failed treatments, in the past, it actually makes whoever comes after so much harder because now we have to break through and get you to buy into, you know, and that's so important. What you said, you're looking for that kind of that teamwork, you know, rather than me saying, yeah, do this, go home, you know, come back again.
Completely, yeah. I think that's exactly what I was looking for, with someone who could kind of understood, you know. And I think like Wade and I are very similar in age, if not the same age, and like you understand what I want to do, you understand the level of sport I wanted to get back to, and I think that was nice. You know, rather than just giving me here's the textbook generic how you recover from an ACL, you kind of, you know, we were eventually throwing rugby balls around, you know, and I think that was like a really cool little. You're not just like sending me out into the world and you're not really sure of how I even play or what I'm really into or what else I do in my life. You know, you were asking me what I do and how I play, and I think just having that like little personalization in that process made it like really enjoyable.
And what sort of things like started ticking the boxes mentally for you in terms of like the physical exercise stuff maybe, and you know, like just the things that you would say while you guys were maybe busy doing some form of rehab?
Yeah, I think when we would do, you know, especially when we were getting to the functional stuff, and you know, we would go and do certain functional exercises, and I was going through, you know, the 1 week where there was 10 wobble moments, you know, and then the next week there was 5 wobble moments, and then the week after there was maybe 2 wobble moments, you know, and Wade was kind of, you know, giving me some really good positive reinforcement. Yeah, I think like those types of little things you have to take as milestones rather than just seeing like each physio session as a larger picture. I think like the way I approached it was, you know, you got to look at take joy in those little things and then let that soak in and let those things become like little mental boosts for you. Because if you just take away all the negative things, that, you know, the one wobble you had, it's not great, you know. And I think yeah, just the general feedback and the you know, like I was saying, the personal touch. I could WhatsApp Wade, send him a weird video of me in my bedroom doing some therapy.
Exercising.
Enjoying it.
I'm sure you did.
But I think just that's, you know, that's having someone be honest also, or going like, oh, that, you know, that wobble on that last one wasn't that good. Maybe try it again. You know, I think it helped like push through that mental barrier, because I think Wade could tell whether it was my mind letting me down or it was my body letting me down. And I think that comes from him, you know, getting to know me.
Would it be fair to say then that you felt like he was invested in your rehab as well, as opposed to kind of just being, okay, you're coming to see me, but yeah, I'm treating you, but you're kind of on your own, basically. Whereas if you have that connection, have that person that's almost like he's there with you or she's there with you, you know, kind of along the journey, you can feel like I can actually work with this person rather than, you know, if I WhatsApp this person, am I bothering them? You know, I don't want to take away from their time. And sometimes that can create still like a barrier for the rehab almost, man. You know, like I can't feel like I can't bridge this gap between the two of us almost, man, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I think like, and I mean, we had that exact discussion. I said, you know, can I I feel bad WhatsApping you in the evening. You're probably like having a time, date night with your wife or whatever, and I'm busy like asking you stupid knee questions. And I was like, no, just.
Where's the biggest idea?
It's like playing FIFA.
It's ACL time.
It's ACL time.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, it was nice and someone to not be like, okay, cool, I'll, you know, add it to your invoice next time, or the case. It's like he actually cared, which was quite nice, you know. And those stupid questions that run around in your head, and you brought up earlier, is kind of instead of sitting on Google and like finding these kind of doomsday scenarios, I could send Wade a message and say, no, you know, do this. Even sending me, you know, last minute exercises to do or whatever the case was. I think that did help me really get invested in it because he was invested in it, you know. And I, you know, while it is good to have that like patient, you know, professional relationship, at the end of the day, it is rehab. It's like rehabilitation, like a drug rehabilitation. You can't have no personal interaction with the person. I mean, that becomes too, you know, a little bit too sterile. I think like it's a weird way I was looking at it, but it's true. You know, it is a rehabilitation process, and you have to have two people connecting in order for that to happen. So
That's a good point actually, compared
It's
with
very-
drug. Yeah, but I haven't thought of it like that, but it's
Nice.
interesting.
you know, you can't tell a drug addict, don't message me after hours.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
he's trying to rehabilitate himself back to his previous life or his original life, whatever. So I think in that same way, obviously you guys have your own lives, and you know there has to be, I guess, like, you know, time and a place for it. But I think it, you know, someone might have that kind of like mental breakdown over the ACL injury in the middle of the night, and obviously you don't want phone calls in the middle of the night, but if you can kind of, you know, address that when it happens, I think it goes a long way.
So what you say when the ACL patients come in here the first day, we've got to do those 12-step affirmations. I am.
Let's get in the circle. Tell us what you did wrong. Yeah, but I think definitely the, you know, just showing, like, you know, excuse my French, but like just giving a shit. Like,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
it makes a huge difference for someone, and it gives that little boost. And you know, Wade even said, like, I think when we hit the 9-month mark, and he said, you know, you're actually my first non-professional patient who's hit 9 months, and I literally was like running around showing my girlfriend the message, and like, you know, and it was like a huge mental boost to be like, you know, putting in the work, actually getting there, because I always, you know, you tend to like doubt yourself and never get back to where you were. So because I trust that he was being honest also. It's not just like, you know, window dressing, like, oh, you're great, 9 months, well done, go off into your sport, you know, and then you're back in a couple months.
So was there ever a time where he asked you to do something or expected something from you in terms of rehab, and you thought, can I do this? Are you sure?
Yeah, I think
Nice catch, man.
very impressive. I think the day when we went to the track and you said, like, cool, run like a 40-meter dash type of a thing, I was just like, no, my knee's going to explode. I think you laughed and said, no, like...
Did you say that to him at the time?
I don't know.
My knee's going to explode, and you're like, no.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think when you're getting to that kind of, I don't know, get mid to later stage, real functional stuff, there was a lot of moments like that. But then every time, you know, he was right. Like, I did do it, and then, you know, I ticked that box. So then at the point where he was telling me to, you know, do a one-legged hop off of a giant box, I didn't second guess it. I got up and did it. So, but it did start gradually, I think, of course.
You needed to build up some credits.
For sure, but yeah, at that point I was like 100% in. I mean, if you told me to jump off the bridge, I probably would have done it.
Okay.
Missed opportunity. Too late
Missed
now.
opportunity.
Too late now.
Wow.
But that's awesome, man. The other thing I wanted to ask you about is the mental aspect. So yes, we've been we focused a lot on the physical, getting let's say getting the swelling down, then getting the range back, then getting the quads to fire, then getting you off the crutches, you know, out of the brace, moving, running, jumping. Now you're doing all these things, and we're heading towards being more functional, mentally, physically. You know, you're feeling good. Where were you mentally at the stages where you're like, oh, I could go play again? Because a big thing that you told me was like, and I remember it clearly because you are the first non-professional athlete that's actually completed, and me actually saying, yeah, man, you've done it, cleared. You know, when you need me, I'm here, but you know, you clear to play. Because what happens is a lot of the times when you see an ACL, look, it's a long time, and it's a long time, especially in private practice where I'm having to fork out money all the time, and people have the wrong idea. They're thinking those weekly sessions in the beginning is going to be weekly for a year, you know, and we space it out because a lot of the work is, you know, you're doing at home, and you like everyone when they can run or they walk and they can do all their things properly, they're like, oh, I'm actually fine and I'm done, you know. So you actually, the first non-professional athlete that's actually walked the whole way, where I could actually say, congratulations, you've graduated, and you know, so that's awesome. So heading through this, before even getting a ball in your hand and things like that, where were you mentally heading towards that kind of more sports specific?
Yeah, I think you're right in saying it's long. It is a long time. You know, people say like a year flies by, but I think when you're looking at the calendar and counting the days, it's a long time. but yeah, I think I learned quite early on also, and it was actually quite a little pearl of wisdom. My girlfriend said, it's like, it's not a recovery of this kind of ACL is not a straight line. You know, even if you go home and I do all the exercises you did. I do put the ice on, rest, put my leg up. You have down days, you know, whereas, and expecting that was I think very helpful, because when I had a good day, I rode that wave. When there was a down day, you don't want to get flustered and frustrated and throw the crutches down or whatever. I think, you know, if I have any advice for anyone who goes through it, like, it's not a straight line. It's like almost like a heartbeat. You can do everything right, and you'll just have one day where getting out of bed is a challenge, you know. So I was heading towards the final stages when we started, getting a little bit closer to actually getting on a field. I was still definitely nervous. Lie if I said I wasn't. I think, like you said, it's quite impossible to simulate sport. I think like I said, in the same with like any one of those exercises where it was a confidence builder, you know, every time we did something, let's say I didn't think maybe I would get to where I was, but we'd do a little field session. I'd go on my own and have like a little pop or a crunch or weird sounds come out of the knee. That would happen 5 times. The next week it was 4 times and 3 times. So as I was hitting these like weird little milestones, it was just becoming less and less of a concern. But mentally, I think for me, I was just very excited to get back. I think the attraction of playing the sport again was a huge motivator for me. I think if I didn't have that, pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, it would have, I don't know how other people go through it. Maybe it's jogging or walking their dog or whatever it is. But I think that was a huge motivator for me to keep my confidence up. Whereas I think if I didn't have that, maybe I would have been, that excitement would have been lower and the concern would have been a lot higher. But I was feeling quite confident towards the end of it. And you're reiterating that, you've done the work, do the one-legged side step hop or whatever the case was, and it always went well. And when we were throwing the ball around, that was going really well. Obviously walking onto the field is a whole different thing. But mentally at that point, I was quite confident where I was. I was quite lucky in not having too many physical setbacks.
Except for Corona.
Except for Corona. Yeah, but there was no, no one should take away too much from it. But when you start Googling and reading, people's bodies reject the grafts, people have early arthritis sets in, people have all these complications. And I was very lucky to just physically, I had some aches and pains and stuff that we're still even dealing with, but predominantly it was pretty smooth. So I thought I had to be in a positive headspace. I can moan about my knee and it's not I've had this injury and it's unfair, but there's people that had a lot worse. So I was actually in quite a good headspace towards that period. For me, it was definitely the beginning phases was the most difficult mentally.
And how much do you think it gave you that confidence, having had the program explained to you as being sort of criteria based, that I will be able to do that, or I will attempt to do X once I've done Y, or once I've ticked off this particular thing, and then feeling that growing confidence in, okay, I can actually feel this development because I've tested it in a small way, and that's given me a little bit of confidence, so maybe I feel a little bit better about going to the next step.
Yeah, I think that I was very happy that Wade explained that from the get-go, that let's do this criteria-based program, because then otherwise the alternative is just a waiting game. We're going to just sit around and do the bare minimum until 9 months pass, and then you kind of still are where you are. And it was nice, people, I think any average person, if they go through this, they'll hear criteria-based and go oh God, this is, I have to kind of pass this test in order to do the next thing. But it's also an opportunity to do it sooner, or if you have your own internal clock. I was thinking I wanted to play rugby again within a year. That was kind of my own internal goal. I didn't share that with you because I didn't want to apply pressure or anything. But I thought I was trying to.
Who did have changed it?
Or you may have tried to fast track certain things or to appease me, and that's not what I wanted. So I thought I'd just keep that quiet. But for example, I got my knee straight quicker than the default time, let's say. So and then it helps you stop looking at the time, because I'm suddenly starting to tick these things off the list, which is like, yeah, little milestone. Oh, you squatted 10 kgs, that's a little milestone. So I think that I personally function better on like that type of a thing than wait till 4 weeks. You should be doing this at 4 weeks, because also people's bodies are different, and there's some guys who could. A friend of mine who also was dealing with it, and our timelines were almost exactly the same. He was further ahead in terms of what loading he was doing, but the functional stuff I was leagues ahead of him. So no one was doing better than each other. We just both realized like this is like each person has their own journey with this. It's not, don't look at a textbook and think, oh, at 5 weeks I should be doing this. You're setting yourself up for disappointment or failure. And even if you exceed that, it doesn't necessarily mean you're that much closer to getting back. So the criteria, I think I fully believe in it and think that philosophy is the right way to approach it.
Yeah, sometimes it's tricky to get clients to buy into that, because obviously then, like you said, that they feel like at every single stage you have to almost pass a test. But what's good about it is that it gives you sort of like a map to, if you ask yourself, like at the beginning you walk into Way's room and you say to him, I want to play touch rugby again. So then it gives you a little bit of a roadmap of, I'm here now, I can barely bend my knee, how do I get to playing touch rugby? Pivoting on that knee, planting it and going at 45 degrees, planting it and having somebody fall into me, how is that going to be okay? And you've got these little steps along the way that gives you kind of like a roadmap, and you can measure, am I going off course, am I staying on course, and it gives you kind of just security for me, I feel like,
For sure, I think that I completely agree with that. I think also the criteria is, I quite like looking at like a menu of what we're going to do, Whereas if it is just a time-based thing, like I said, I feel like it kind of ends up being a little bit of a waiting game. Whereas, you were saying, look, we need to get your glutes firing and everything firing, and then I can look at it and wrap my head around why that's important, because I need my leg to have stability. So then it all just, to me, it's just a practical, pragmatic way of approaching it rather than, sitting around. So, I think ticking those things off is a huge bonus also, rather than, if you're looking at like a time-based kind of approach to it, it's kind of this weird omnipotent third party thing that's like in the background. If I sit around, it's just going to get better, I like the challenge of it also. I think seeing what the criteria was and then doing it was quite like fun in a way, and I think that's the way we had to look at it, was don't look at it as a chore, look at it as something you're doing. That to me, that became my hobby, was doing the physio criteria, So I think I completely agree with it.
So you almost end up kind of competing against yourself rather than comparing yourself to other people and where they are. You got your timelines because you got your goals for that specific timeline. One thing I want to ask you about before I forget actually is that there's an interesting space where like the research on ACLs are going into now, and they're looking at more concretely involving the brain in sort of like the rehab, and so like integrating the visualization and that sort of things, man. So sort of like practicing the repetitive visualization. For instance, for you, like running on the touch rugby field and I'm actually sidestepping, man, and going through the physical sensations, the auditory sensations, all of those sort of things, and particularly also the psychological aspects behind it, man. How do you feel like, for you personally, how do you feel that could have been worked into your rehab, and how, if ever, it would have been helpful?
Yeah, I think that would be like very beneficial. I think, like I said, it's very difficult to simulate not just the actual movements and mechanics of a sport, but just even the environment, because it's one thing in a gym, staring at your knee and planting it in a quiet, flat ground. It's different when there's a floodlight in your eye and there's people screaming and someone throwing a ball at your face, and so maybe at a late stage, perhaps some more like on-field sessions, especially for ball sports, recovering athletes or amateur people, whatever it is. I think that would definitely help. Like the idea even of, like we spoke about a little bit, like slipping on a pair of boots, suddenly the traction under your feet is like a completely different thing to running around on a flat tartan surface or whatever it is. So I think the more you can like creep back into the the environment and the space that where the scene of the crime, where the injury happened, or the whatever, I think that would help tremendously with not this huge jarring moment where you walk out of physio, shake your physio's hand, and then suddenly you're slipping on boots, putting on a scrum cap or whatever it is, and it feels like a different world,
Yeah.
Whereas I think it would bring that practicality to the field and say, oh, cool, now you've got your boots on, now you're about to catch a ball. Remember that box jump we did? That's the step you're going to take there, or whatever it is.
Yeah, and I think a cool thing to bring in here is the ACL RSI, Return to Sports Index.
Yeah.
I had him fill out one just before we did a more sports specific, where he actually had a rugby ball in hand. I was running at him and he had to sidestep me, then pass, and we set up a little obstacle course simulating how he's stepping off, trying to step me, I'm closing him down, and those kind of things. And the difference between what his index showed before we had that session and then what it showed after that session. And if I'm not mistaken, that was within the space of a week, 2 weeks. So it was literally just the mental side that, him ticking off, I'm not that confident in stepping off on the field, to doing a session where he actually had a ball in hand. It's not a rugby pitch, we don't have boots on, but I'm a moving target, I'm trying to stop him from moving, he has to run around a cone, pass, and then, and how that just jumps. So how that mental aspect and that feedback that, oh, I'm actually doing it, there's a ball, I'm concentrating on seeing something else, how that changed the whole kind of index score when he did it the second time around.
Yeah, that day and that drill we did, I think, was a huge leap forward for the confidence and for just the actually taking my eyes off my knees and what we were doing as in terms of just compartmentalized physio sessions into all the stuff suddenly coming together, and you were saying focus on me, don't stare, catch the ball. I think that was a huge step forward. So I think the more of those types of drills or exercises in a late stage kind of phase, I think would do a world of good for people making that final return.
Because I'll tell you why I asked that is I kind of played around with it a little bit with one of my ACL clients, and he was a basketball player. He's over in Germany now, but he it was so bad for him, traumatic, so to speak, that he couldn't watch basketball games on TV when it happened. He didn't want to interact with his teammates and the WhatsApp group and that kind of stuff. So kind of early on, I knew there was going to be a mental challenge as well, man. So what we did early on was, and his mom said to me that we shouldn't be doing this, and I begged her to trust me. I don't know why actually I didn't. Why I thought it would work, but so I had him sitting in front of a mirror. We had the injured side kind of blocked off, so you could only sort of see the mirror image of his good side, and he was sitting there bouncing a basketball and just doing that for 5 minutes at a time. Then I would say to you, okay, I'm going to support this leg, I'm going to block it out, you're going to then stand on this one leg. And eventually it got to a point and this was early on in the rehab, he was still in his brace because he had some other complications. And eventually it started to kind of assist what we were doing on this side, man. It was very interesting for me to see, just to experiment with this.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah, but this was done way early on in the rehab, and it's interesting for me to hear you say that you would have liked that kind of stuff, or you would like that stuff later on in the rehab, so we're still finding our way in terms of where that needs to come in, but it's this kind of input that we need, man,
But also a very cool point that Jeremy made as well is that it's very much dependent on the individual.
Yeah.
So he might need to feed on that later in his rehab, where your patient needed that earlier. So like we said, 20 ACLs, it depends on what you do afterwards, but also what we as therapists picks up, that energy that we can pick up, and that's it. At the end of the day, we're not treating an ACL, we're treating a human being.
Yeah, I think that ties into what I was saying. I think getting to know the person, then their personality type. Maybe they're more even they're going to be introverted in their road to recovery. So maybe that confidence will grow, and at a later stage, that's when you can inject that stuff. Maybe some people need that confidence boost from the get-go, and where's that perfect example you gave. And it is a traumatic thing. I think I don't think people really understand the pain, and it is like quite a, you know, like I said, it's like returning back to the scene of the crime. When I was putting on my boots the first time, I was like, shit, you know, like going back to where this happened. So I think you have to kind of curate it in a way that suits the individual. But I think the more of that, the better. You know, getting people over that fear. I struggle to watch. As soon as I see someone's knee bending weirdly in a tackle or something on TV, I still struggle to look at it.
So what was that sort of like first live, full speed, in-game side step on that knee? What was that like? Did you kind of like, okay, here we go?
It was actually, actually quite recently, because I think I've been playing for about 5 or 6 weeks now. First game, obviously, very slow, kind of kicking stones on the wing a little bit and not getting too involved. But, you know, my goal was, like, you know, talking about, like, small milestones. It was like, when I got there, it wasn't like I'm going to be the best coming back, you know, already getting grief from the other guys about how skinny my legs are or whatever. So you're already, like, you know, a bit hesitant. But the goal was get your boots on, walk across the white line, and walk off uninjured again. That was kind of, like, the overall goal. But I wasn't concerned that you know, it's not ready or whatever. I knew that, trust that we'd done the work. That actually came naturally. I think like throughout a few weeks, got a bit better, a bit more comfortable, a bit better. And like a week or so ago, like kind of changed both angles and, you know, beat a defender. Kind of one of those like weird subconscious kind of sports moves. And it is quite, you know, to everyone else, it's just the game goes on, score, try, whatever, restart. But it is quite an emotional thing when you do it and you know.
So you were out there high-fiving
you kind of like, it happens and you look down and you're expecting, like, you're waiting for like the numbness of the pain to kick in or something, and it doesn't, you know, and I think your brain's playing tricks on you. But it's it's quite a milestone to do, and I think whatever it is, you know, whether it was like doing a basketball leap or coming down or your Achilles tore or whatever, I think to get to that point where you replicating the moment it kind of happened and pulling it off, I think it's like a huge confidence boost from that moment.
And I mean, like, it's probably an unfair question to ask you, but what kind of advice or tips would you give physios? You know, because we all have our little, you know, ways of thinking, you know, and sometimes that blinds us to other things, and it's good to hear your perspective and like what sort of things would you have appreciated differently, but in general, and you know, just or what sort of advice would you want to give physios or bios or whoever?
Yeah, I think like maybe, you know, like I think we've been touching on, it's just like a personalization of the process, and you know, I think a lot myself, like, I'm a chatty guy and we've had a good laugh and stuff, but I am quite, you know, a little closed off and maybe a little bit introverted from the get-go, and then I like open up and can have a laugh, you know, and I think there are people who will go into a physio session and maybe like withhold information or not explain what they want to do, or, you know, because I think there is an element of, you know, frustration or disappointment or embarrassment with a sports injury or any type of injury. And maybe if it could, like, I know it's a lot to ask of a physio to kind of be a bit of a, like a, you know, a parenting hand to siphon the information out about what they want to achieve. How do they feel about it? You know, like, no one really asks, like, are you upset that you had the injury? Like, were you frustrated? How did you feel when it happened? You know, there's time to reflect afterwards. But I think maybe like pulling out that kind of information early on might help you build that personalized kind of progress down the road, you know?
Okay. And part two, sorry, wait. I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit now, if you don't mind. Like,
he likes doing this.
Don't turn the tables on me, though. That's not fair. What do you feel like, what could have been done, or the steps could have been taken to avoid that initial year process? Because obviously things didn't go as they should have, you know? So what can we learn from that, or what can we take as clinicians to avoid that from happening with other people?
Yeah, I guess, like, for me, you know, I would have made my particular circumstance of the buyer I went and visited to be more reliant on an orthopedic surgeon or the MRI technology that's available. I kind of felt there was whether it was, you know, maybe arrogance or overconfidence or just an oversight, was like, don't go for an MRI and like, you might not need it. Like, maybe it's got a money associated thing, didn't want to rather just be, I think, like upfront and have clarity with the person to find out what the issue is from the get-go. Because I mean, after the various things I was doing, I could have just gone for an MRI anyway for the amount of money that it costs. So I think just like honesty and clarity from them, and not being like utilize the also the various disciplines that are available. There are like orthopedic surgeons who obviously specialize in more the surgical side of it, but they might be able to like spot something that a physio didn't, and vice versa. So as you said, I think sometimes like everyone's failed, like it's a flaw with everyone. It's like you can't see the wood through the trees because you're so this is your core competency, but there might be something just outside of it that you miss. So, and that happens to everyone, like an architect or whatever. So that's why they rely on like an engineer to do that. And maybe it's the same kind of thing. There's like a bit more reliance on the people that are available to plug all those holes and make sure that the recovery process is watertight and the diagnosis process is watertight.
So, I mean, not to hog on this, but the reason a lot of clinicians don't do that is because they don't want to feel like they're wasting your time. They don't want to feel like they're burdening you with unnecessary expense. My approach to this is always, whether I'm sure of a diagnosis or unsure, I will say to the client that this is what I think, these are your options. I'm going to give you as much information as I can about the topic, and I'm going to allow you to make the decision. Whether you want to consult me on that decision afterwards or during that process is up to you, but I can't make the decision for you. I can't assume that you can or can't afford an MRI or what level of importance that is to you. I'm just going to give you the information, and then we can make the decision together if you want, or you can do it on your own.
Sure, I think that's like the best approach is, like you said, you can't really like be like you must go for an MRI or a second assessment or whatever. But I think providing them enough information, and then this is my personal recommendation, I think you do this. I think that's would go a long way. Whereas I feel there's like a little bit of in my experience, it was a little bit of like coldness with like what the next step is. It's like you go and put some ice on it, and like we'll see you in a week. It wasn't like rather the honesty I think will help speed things up and solve a lot of issues from the get-go. And I know it is a difficult balance because you don't want to also like deter someone or like disappoint them or drop bad news, but I think like there's a way of doing it, especially if you know their personality, of like tapping into look, this has happened, it's worse than you think it is, but it's not the end of the world, you can come back from it.
Okay, that makes a complete sense. I don't know how you feel about it.
I definitely think so. I definitely think it's useful to know these things, and for other therapists out there to also kind of get the patient's view on it, because we don't always ask these questions. We don't always ask, what could I have done differently? Where do you think we could have improved on? So I think that's very valuable for me to hear, and everyone else who wanders across this talk or discussion as well. So, back playing, how are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm very happy. I had a very, very good game last week. Still easing back, but starting to feel more and more up to scratch and up to speed with the other fellas there. And just getting back out onto the field and throwing the ball around is like, it's been a long time coming. A year not doing it is very difficult, especially after lockdown and everything, just watching everything come to a standstill. So very happy. Can't keep thinking and getting more and more excited every week to play again. But still putting in all the work and found a nice groove now of balancing, still doing ongoing strengthening exercises, playing, and feel like it actually, while the injury was not a great thing I recommend, but it was a nice way to reflect on what my body needs and what I need to do to keep playing sports. So now it's kind of I could used to, like, say, as a kid, I could sit on my boots and go play whatever. Now it's like, if I want to play sports, I need to do this. So it's kind of like hand in hand now, which is really cool. So feeling good.
And this that you're talking about, like, what is that? What are you doing currently at the moment?
So it's still pretty much a lot of the late stage strengthening and functional stuff that I was doing with Wade. Still sticking with some of a lot of those late stage functional stuff, dropping off a box. Basically the RSI, some of the RSI exercises, drills, I'm like doing on a weekly basis while trying to obviously put some muscle back on the leg and stuff, but more concerned about the control and keeping that function fresh. A very big thing that like maybe one of the things I missed that I would highly recommend is like the value of stretching. That I think it was more due to lockdown and us obviously not being able to do a few sessions during that period, but a lot of the the deep tissue stuff I think I ticked all the boxes, and if I critique myself on how I went through it, I'm very proud of myself what I did, but I think maybe stretching was one of the elements I neglected, so that's now part of my regular routine. That's something that I completely did neglect my whole life.
Okay. Stretching, that's interesting controversial
I
topic.
feel another topic coming. Another episode, maybe. Another episode.
I won't dive too deep into it though.
Sounds good.
Well, Jeremy, thank you for sharing your story. I'm sure it's going to be valuable for a lot of people out there, and really appreciate you taking the time to come down and chat to the two of us.
Yeah, man. It was really interesting to hear your story. I really appreciate it. And it's good for people to hear that. Also, one last thing I promised before I let you go, I have to ask you this from a client's perspective. How do you feel about physio, bio, whatever, saying to you, I'm not sure, I don't know?
Yeah, I would be, if there's like a follow-up statement after that, you know what I mean? What is the next step? Like what we were saying earlier, if there's any doubt, I would be okay with that, but maybe it's like, look, I'm not sure, I'm going to call in my, whatever the case is, rather than just, saying something that perhaps is not accurate,
Or stubbornly persisting with something even though...
Exactly, and like you said, it is a for this example, someone's ACL could tear completely different to someone else's, so there's not always going to be a definitive answer of everything. So I think being open to the probability that things are going to change and adapt throughout your progress. Yeah, as long as there's an answer to that, I don't know.
No, that's good. That's good for all of us to hear, I think. So once again, Jeremy, thank you for your time. It's been very insightful. I'm sure everybody out there will also pick on your little pearls of wisdom, because this is the kind of thing that we actually do need a lot. So really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for letting me come on, guys. I think it's cool, and I think the more of this, the better. I think I relied on other content out there from other people who've gone through it, or online physios or whatever, in hand with what the personal experience I was having with Wade. So I think the more of this, the better. The more different views people hear, the better, and understand that it's like even a sports injury, there's ways to come back from it.
That's good, man. Hopefully we can put out some more content like this. Give the people what they want.
Give the people what they want. Sure. Thanks so much, Jeremy.
Cool. Thanks, fellas.
Thank you.